Hey, it's Locust Luciano.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us today at RT Podcast, Respect, Humility, and Empathy. Those are the values that we talk about very frequently, and we try to use those to try to gain some more information about the world, and maybe sometimes even some more information about ourselves. So that being said, I want to thank you for joining us today. And Darrington, let's see, how has your week been going so far, Darrington?
Weekend is going amazing. I'm
All right.
very happy.
Well, it's actually night here in South Korea. Our day is just ending, but I know you're getting ready to start your Saturday. So I want to wish you a great weekend. Getting into what we're going to be talking about today is I want to explore some sides of atheism and theism. And to start off, though, I would like to ask you to define a few words for me. Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So the first word I want you to define for me is theism. I'm taking notes here, so do not mess up, Darrington.
Okay. Well, to me, theism is the belief in a deity, some, divinity worthy of worship. And
it has to be worthy of worship.
Well, no, actually, that's a good point. But to me, the difference between theism and, say, spirituality is worship and dogma, right? So to me, the theist says, I know, and there's a doctrine, like here's what you're supposed to do with your life in order to rectify it with the deity.
All right. Okay, I got it. Next one is, how do you define atheism?
Just sort of the absence of that, right? Like, so when I say I'm an atheist, it means that I'm unconvinced to the existence of a deity.
So in your worldview, then, okay, so the next word is, how do you define agnosticism?
I think agnosticism is sort of on its own sort of orthogonal scale to theism, atheism, where the Gnostic is a true believer. A Gnostic is somebody who believes wholeheartedly that whatever the subject is the truth, whereas an agnostic is reserving judgment, right? A fully agnostic person says, well, we don't know.
Okay, and make sure I write all this down. Okay, and then the next one is, how do you define an anti-theist?
So I'd say that the anti-theist goes one step further than just not being convinced of the existence of a God. The anti-theist says not only the premise of a God is on its face something that cannot be proven or disproven, right? So not only do I not know, you don't know either. Nobody can make a claim to special knowledge. And the anti-theist says if somebody is making a claim to special knowledge, they're wrong and potentially dangerous.
So okay, so then, if, let's just say, for example, hypothetically speaking, if an anti-theist did get convinced, let's say someone was able to demonstrate it, would they not by default oppose that God?
Well, that's a good point, because there's two.
That's a question.
Well, it's a point phrased in a question, right?
Okay.
Because there are two different sort of ways of framing the anti-theist perspective, right? One being, given that there's no way logically to prove or disprove the existence of a God, the representatives of any given God on earth, right, don't have anything to stand on and are probably doing more harm than good. The other side of that is like, okay, if we did have evidence for the existence of this deity, what kind of deity is it? Is it a benevolent deity? Is it malevolent? Is it something worthy of our worship?
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
I think a lot of anti-theists
so
take that stance as well, or take that
okay.
definition as well.
Okay. So last one is, how would you define a deist? Wait, you want to hear my definition?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
A deist is a bastard child between a deist and an atheist.
Maybe. I think that my understanding of deism is
That's it. That's the
there,
tagline.
there's a deity that started it all off, got the ball rolling, kicked it off at the beginning, a creator, and then kind of went off on their own. And we really should not make any decisions in our lives based off of the existence of this deity. It's just a creator God.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you're right. That is a transition, probably from the more theistic, like absolute, we know the will of God, to atheism, where you say, well, maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe we probably, lacking evidence, shouldn't give it any more thought.
Okay, so all right. So I'm glad I got you to define those. I think the atheism one is a little bit lacking, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But okay, so that being said, I want to ask you one more question. Where, if you lack a belief in God, then where do morals come from?
So morals are a construct that we establish as we go through life, right? So they come from us. I develop my own morals, you develop your own morals. Collectively, we negotiate and collaborate on sort of a moral framework that we can all live by, or at very least, survive each other.
So by your definition, then it's not possible to have objective morals, correct?
I don't want to say by definition it's not possible. I think, there's nothing sort of logically on its face wrong with authoritative morality, but I don't believe that authoritative morality is necessary. I think it's a much simpler model to just assume that we've sort of bootstrapped this idea of morality into our culture and into our. I mean, you laugh, but that's the
No,
truth.
no,
That's what I
no.
believe.
I'm actually not laughing at that. I'm laughing at the analogies that you use, because in one conversation you said that the problem of evil is a plot hole. Now
Yeah.
you're saying the morality thing is the bootstrap, which is a bootstrap paradox, is whenever you have like time travel and then like something from the future gets sent back to the past, and then that somehow winds up being the creation of it. And then so it's like, where do you really know where it was created? Was it created in the past or the future, or was it ever really created? So it can be
Yeah.
a little bit confusing.
Can I elaborate on that a little bit? Because
Yeah, that's what I was
bootstrapping is
laughing at. I wasn't laughing at what you said. Just I like the way you reason through things.
it's typically a term associated with like development. So like bootstrapping is a method for getting a very, very complex system, starting with a very simple premise and then iterating over and over and over again. So it's basically like the solution to the chicken and the egg problem.
I was gonna say what came from, that's exactly what
Yeah.
came to my mind.
Yeah. And so like evolution bootstraps the chicken and egg problem by saying there was never really a first chicken and never really a first egg. We have these tiny little improvements that correspond with each other over time, and eventually you get something
Right.
complex.
Do you believe in a literal Big Bang, where like all the energy and everything in the universe was condensed into a single point?
Yeah, well, I believe that there was a point in our history where time and space were compressed into a very, very small space comparatively. Usually when we talk about the Big Bang, we're talking about the origin of the universe, but actually what the Big Bang really refers to is the rapid expansion of the universe shortly after it began. So yeah, I believe that if you look back in time, the universe is expanding now. So if you rewind that tape, it's gonna get smaller, and eventually there was a point where it was very, very small. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat. Okay, somewhat. So, okay. So atheists very frequently like accuse believers of believing in fairy tales or hocus pocus and things like that. You're familiar with that, right? So do you, and it's fine if you do, like these aren't questions intentionally meant to entrap you or belittle you, because that's not what that's not the goal of this channel. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But does it ever cause you a level of cognitive dissonance or moral and intellectual uh, compromising that you would have to believe that like 2 trillion galaxies were able to fit into like something the size of like a grain of sand? Like, does that ever, and somehow they were able to expand into space, which is simultaneously being created? Like, does that ever cause you like nights where you're like, how do I really hold on to this view?
Not really, because like in the sort of, let's call it the prehistoric universe, right? It was all of that those huge massive atomic structures didn't exist, right? Those were all created by stars.
Right, of course.
And you know, the only thing that would stop something from being able to bunch up like that on a single point would be I think it's leptons, right? That can't have the same quantum quantum state as other leptons. But if there's no leptons, right, they haven't developed yet, then it's perfectly natural to assume that, you know, the universe could collapse onto a single point.
And so, but okay, let me clarify something, because I actually believe in the Big Bang, and I do believe in evolution. And I do think that those are perfectly consistent with the God who's creating something. Like there, even if the Bible talks about creation, it doesn't ever talk about how he's actually doing it, you know? So now that being said, I have taken a position that says it's possible. I mean, I'm not saying it this actually happened, because some Christians hear this and like, oh, you actually believe that? Or some atheists will hear this and they'll be like, oh, that actually makes sense. I'm like, no, this is not saying this actually happened, but let's just assume for a second that the Big Bang did happen for no reason, for no cause, nothing, just completely by itself. And God somehow evolves from this, and he's essentially able to master the laws of physics, which tells us that things can actually travel backwards in time. So he's able to rewind the clock back to the beginning and then start it all. I guess that's kind of like the bootstrap paradox that you're talking about.
That's a very different kind of bootstrap paradox, right? Because if
not really, let's say, where did everything come from? Like, okay, did it come from God? Did God go back into the past? It's kind of like a Terminator thing going on.
Yeah. So like one of the really appealing descriptions of God is that he's outside of space and time. He or she or it, whatever it may be. And being that they are outside of space, space and time, right? They can rewind the tape, they can make edits. So, you know, imagine yourself editing a film, like to the world of the film, you are sort of God. Because you can rewind, you can make edits anywhere you want. Well, that's sort of unsatisfying, because like if there was a creator that is that means that everything that happens is the creator's will, because the creator at any time in his timeline can edit our timeline. That's kind of unsatisfactory, right? Like we don't appear to be in a universe that's directed in a very interesting sort of creative way. We appear to be in a universe that just sort of like, for whatever reason, the high state of energy was set up at the beginning, and the dominoes just fell, and like a Rube Goldberg machine, right? It's just playing out the actions that
Okay.
were set up in the initial states.
Okay, so here's my problem with this, and I don't know. I cannot project my values or what's gonna satisfy me intellectually to you, because those might be two totally different things. But I will tell you this. I'm not sure if I have told you this, but I was I was I was in South Korea, which is where I live, and I went on this hike like with these foreigners. You like rent a bus and you go on it, and I swear, Darrington, we walked down on these boulders for about 3 hours. That these boulders like the size of like these Volkswagens, man. And I was like so frustrated. And I was an atheist at the time, but I remember thinking like after like, okay, the first hour you're like, okay, cool, this is nice, like I'm in nature. But then like the second hour comes around, you're like, oh God, is this gonna end? And then at the third hour, you're like, okay, I'm over this by now. You're like, get me out of here, you know? But I
Right.
mean, that just, it triggered something in my mind that was like, do I really believe that one of these boulders are gonna pop into existence like from nothing? And I did not become a Christian over this. Do not get me wrong. Like going to North Korea, I've told you how North Korea played a role in cracking something in the ceiling for me, but it was these two combinations, the combination of these two things, it created like a giant crack in my dome of atheism that pushed me into something which I guess you would call a deist, because I had to say, okay, I'm not sure, like I don't know who he is right now, but I can't believe, I personally cannot believe that this just happened out of nothing. All right. So that was part of my own little story there. But I want to ask you another question. Okay, this gets to morality, okay? Because you were talking, okay. Okay, so let me premise this one. So you believe in evolution, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in your line of evolution, your ideas of evolution, what really makes a human more important than an ant or a grasshopper or a lion? Because we did an interview with a guy by the name of T Jump, and he could not distinguish. I don't know if he was being intentional about this. It was for shock value. He couldn't make a distinguishment that a human life was more valuable than that of a dog or a grasshopper. And so it's like that's one of the things that I call like a slippery slope on atheism, where if you're reducing this, if you're getting down to the brass tacks of what you actually believe, then how exactly do you say that a human has more value than a snake or a zebra or whatever?
Yeah. I guess a lot of that depends on how we're defining the words important or value, right? Humans are more valuable than an ant or ants in respect to what and what way. Um, if we're talking about being more valuable to us, emotionally, or more important to humans, well, yeah, it makes sense that we would be more valuable to each other because we're the same species.
Mhm,
Um, we have a lot of evolutionary baggage, a lot of traits that we have developed over time to make
mhm,
us reliant on each other. And for instance, like I have to sleep 8 hours a night, right? So, and part of that is to power this enormous brain that we have. But in order to sleep 8 hours a night, I need to trust somebody to protect me while I'm completely unconscious and vulnerable to the world. So my primate ancestors developed a very interesting, answer to that problem, and that is empathy. So yeah,
Hello,
right,
empathy.
right. We are more important to each other for a lot of reasons. But I think initially the spark that started that fire was that we needed to depend on each other. Now,
To
do I
survive.
think, yeah, do I think in the big scheme of things, like universally speaking, that humans are more important than ants? No, no, I don't think humans are more important than bacteria in the big scheme of things. There is no absolute value or trajectory in which we're headed towards. We're not higher, than anything else in the universe. But to each other, we treat each other as if we are, because that's important to us.
Right. So
We care about each other.
I do want to make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth. So in your scheme of everything, souls do not exist, correct?
Yeah, not to the degree that it's often defined as, right?
Oh, I'm not talking about James Brown's soul here.
Well, I mean, like when people talk about, what do you mean by soul?
Like an immaterial part of your body that lives on after you die.
I don't see any
Person.
evidence for it.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, I guess it's possible that something like that could evolve. I guess given enough time,
Right.
but let's just throw that out for a second. So, I want to ask you a question. Okay, so I would like you to tell me a historical figure or someone who you admire. People normally say Mother Teresa, but I guess there's a lot of atheists who don't really like her that much.
Yeah.
Can you tell me
I'm not
someone?
a fan. Of someone that I really
You admire?
admire.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah, I admire the heck out of the people who dedicate their lives to like experimental science, particularly. The theoretical scientists tend to get a lot of like a lot of the praise, but
Right.
there's these people who they dedicate their whole life to running these experiments just to increase the wealth of human knowledge. So like it's funny because it's sort of a nameless, category,
Yeah.
but man, I can't even think of a higher calling.
So, well, I can, but we won't go there.
Right.
Okay, so I was talking more like a JFK or Martin Luther King or just a single person who you think is like has the best qualities, like Booker T. Washington.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't.
Hitchens.
I learned a long time ago not to idolize people. I would say, you know, one person who had a huge impact on my life was Carl Sagan.
Okay,
I think I
so
was
let's
8
okay.
when I first introduced to him and
Yeah,
changed everything.
let's run with that guy for a second.
Okay.
Because all right. I think I told you, Isaac Asimov said he met that dude, and he said he's the only person he's ever met who made him feel like a total idiot. And so, okay, so Carl Sagan, aka Carl Pagan, was an atheist, correct?
Sure.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
so
I'm not even sure if he actually ever claimed to be an atheist, specifically.
well, he was
He
definitely
clearly
pretty
had
lofty
some
with it.
concerns about religion and
Religion. Oh yeah.
religions.
Okay. So let's say someone like him, and I do believe that there are a lot of secular humanists that probably do more good on average than your average let's say like Christian or theist in the universe. I do believe that. So it's like I don't want to make a blanket statement that atheists are bad or atheists are going around doing bad stuff because that's not part of my that's not part of my position. But that being said, as of this moment, Carl Sagan, and let's just take someone who I personally admired, which is Martin Luther King, who, as you said, don't idolize people. This guy was pretty bad womanizer, and he, was preaching to people about following God and stuff and behaving like this. So he definitely, you couldn't idolize someone like him. But on the other hand, even someone who has as many flaws as he did, character flaws, was still able to fight against some pretty darn. He was able to fight against a pretty big opposition. So to not relent, even in the face of all of your flaws, I mean, I think that's a very worthwhile cause.
Mhm.
I admire that, regardless, whatever else I might have found out about him. So anyway, that being said, does it trouble you that, according to your worldview, a Martin Luther King or a KKK member, or who's no longer with us anymore, or Carl Sagan, ultimately, however they chose to end their life at this point, wouldn't have mattered one way or the other? Like, their fates are exactly the same. They whether they chose to do good with their atheism or bad with it, at this point, it wouldn't have mattered one way or the other. Does that cause what does that cause in your mind?
Well, I first of all, I think that makes their contributions so much more powerful, and I'm much more appreciative of their contributions because there was no reward, no ultimate reward, right? The reward was that the world that they left behind would be better than the world they've found when they came along. And that is how they live on, in sort of the hearts and minds of those of us who get to stay at the party longer than they did.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think that it lowers or degrades the appreciation or the importance of somebody's life that they don't have an afterlife. If anything, it makes it that much more valuable, that much more precious. Every moment is precious that we're alive, because life is just this little fleeting thing that we're fortunate enough to have, the opportunity to experience.
So I think that's fascinating the way you put it. I do think that's fascinating, and I'm not trying to immediately just come in and
Sure,
contradict you,
sure.
because part of this is we're trying to see things from a different perspective. In fact, we just interviewed a very very well known author, and which, I hate to say this, but you totally bombed. But the book we're interviewing her about was seeing things from a different perspective. And what happened with that? But she thought it
Uh,
was funny, but I mean,
yeah,
you just
I don't know. Fanboyed out at the last minute. Listen, this
that's
isn't my day job. So,
so
but
anyway,
yeah.
but the point is that we're trying to see things from a different perspective. So I
Mhm.
don't I don't think there's a lack of validity in what you just said. And if I'm going to be honest, yes, if you believe in an afterlife, and I believe I've told you this, I believe that when we're still mad at each other's arguments, I did say that, look, if I were to believe, like, I actually kind of wish I would have that belief about my daughter, that this is the only time I have with her. So I really need to enjoy it, because there's like, it honestly never comes into my mind really to think about, oh, am I going to be able to spend eternity with my daughter? That doesn't really enter into my mind. But if, let's just say, for example, if I found out my daughter had bone cancer, whatever, and she's going to live the last 3 months of her life, that would put a lot of emphasis on this time that we have together. So I understand in principle why an atheist would be able to enjoy those moments. Okay, if you believe, if you I don't believe this is 1% of the word accurate, but if that which you actually would believe, I would assume it would make you value, as kind of like what you just said right now, right?
Mhm.
So my problem with that whole thing is, you take someone like these people from okay, Columbine. Okay, let's take these two boys, these two youngsters who are knuckleheads. Okay, they're not. We were all 17 years old at one point of our lives, but they're knuckleheads, and they have this animus towards God. Okay, and these guys like to play their shoot up games, and they're like, hey, well, basically, doesn't really matter what we're gonna do either way. If we live to be 100 years old or if we die tomorrow, we might as well go out in like a video game type style fashion. Let's have some fun before we die. So my problem is that I do think that it can lead to some dangerous results. Not to say that this is not to say that that doesn't happen inside of religion, but what are your thoughts on that? Can you give me your honest opinion on that?
Yeah, this is sort of like pessimistic nihilism that you go through, um, particularly as you start struggling with your mortality, right? And that's regardless of whether or not there's an afterlife. Because even if there is an afterlife, like we're done here, right? At some point, we all die. That's not in question. You're not coming back. Am I wrong? Like once you pass on, you're passed on.
Well, I don't know. You're familiar with Mormon theology. I kind of like Mormon theology a little bit better than straight up Christian theology because they talk about existing in various different states afterwards. So it's not like, okay, immediately you're like heaven or hell. That's a pretty. I mean, that's probably the thing that caused me the biggest amount of cognitive dissidence inside of Christianity, because life is very rarely whites and blacks. There's always a lot of grays, and to me, it doesn't really make sense that you have an infinite being to create people with to exist in an infinite amount of time to only judge them on something that's going to happen at most 100 years.
Yeah.
Most of
Okay.
which was just a domino being pushed over onto them. Like you
Right.
being white, being Mexican, us both being males born in the 20th century.
A lot of things you
There's
can't
a lot of
control.
things. What was that?
A lot of things you can't control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know, I may be totally wrong in this sense, but when I think of like, because just so you know, all that is based upon one scripture found inside of the book of Hebrews. It says, it is appointed man once to die, and then after that to be judged. Well, the thing is, the way I see it, and again, I may be totally wrong on this. This is just from what my understanding about God is and morality, that like I could truly loving God would give us multiple chances to try to get to Him. Like so if you did mess up in this lifetime, either getting reincarnated or would make more sense. Maybe it's not true. Maybe reincarnation isn't true. I'm just saying that seems to make more sense if we're just evaluating this whole thing equally. Like you have eternity to perfect someone. Like if you only have like 5 years to pull something off and that's what you did, I'd be like, yeah, that totally makes sense. But if you have like eternity, it's like I do want to say, like, have you ever seen the movie The Butterfly Effect?
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
that is actually one of my top 5 movies of all time. And one of the reasons why I'm so obsessed about that movie is because I know this concept to be true. I know that you could go back, that you're talking about rewinding things at the beginning. I could go back and rewind and change one single thing that happened in your life, Darrington, and it would completely change you as a human being.
Right.
So to me, I don't know if I'm gonna have any say so in this whenever I see God, but that would be heaven to me. Could be able to go back and do kind of like, the Highway to Heaven, where that dude was jumping back and going and meeting people, or Quantum Leap, where he'd go back into. That's like one of my other favorite shows. But going back into the past and being able to change stuff. That just, if I'm able to choose a heaven, I'm gonna want to spend my eternity trying to go back and rewrite and correct things, because yeah, getting back to what you were saying, it doesn't really make sense to just, you kill someone right now or someone dies and then that's it. As you said, that was it. Maybe when I think about a human being having, because we said we're creating in God's image, So I kind of think about this, and I hope that I'm right. I hope that I'm right that your body may die, but you still have this spirit in your mind. So maybe those two phases go through like a different stage, and I don't know. That's a lot of speculation on my part, though. You know.
I want to say one more thing on this subject is that, you know, because there's no way to pierce the veil, at least that we know of.
Uh-huh.
There's no way of knowing what's on the other side. We still behave practically as if this is our only life, right? So like somebody who wants to, you know, go on a shooting spree, like that happens. People do that regardless of the threat or carrot of heaven and hell. What stops some people is their, you know, internal sense of justice and morality, how they want to be treated. They want to treat the world like that. Some of us want to see the world that we know of, this place that we live in, be a better place for our descendants and for our fellow man.
Mm-hmm.
And some of us just don't want to go, like, don't want the social repercussions of doing breaking some sort of
Taboo.
social contract, right? So the thou shalt not murder is a social contract. I'm going to agree to not murder you, and you're going to agree to not murder me, and we will have a better life because we've agreed to not murder each other. Now, if somebody comes along and they say, for whatever reason, I'm not going to follow that contract, I'm going to break that contract and murder someone, the rest of us collectively get together and say, now we have a bad actor, we need to figure out what we're going to do with this person, whether it's punitive, you know, or it's corrective. So there's absolutely no reason to necessitate an afterlife if what you really want is some purpose in this life and some reason not to just go do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, but so here's the problem with that. Whether or not whatever you think or whatever I think is really irrelevant to whether or not this actually exists. Like that's the real question we should be chasing down now. You know, because according to your definition, first of all, I don't really agree with your definition, with your assessment of atheism.
Mhm.
And because I would, if you're gonna say you're unconvinced and you're gonna say an agnostic is reserving judgment, that's the same thing. You know what I mean? Like those mean the exact same thing. So,
Right.
so for me, if you were an agnostic, I would, or even like an agnostic deist, to me, that's a respectable position. There's for a variety of reasons that I don't believe that atheism is even a viable worldview, honestly. Partially because of the fact that, and this gets down to just epistemology. When you understand what actually epistemology is, and the fact that we don't really know what's actually absolute, like for instance, when you put up your hand and you block out some part of a shadow, whatever, like that shadow over there isn't real. You know, it's actually a blocking of light that's going through. So the reality is there could be some kind of fourth dimensional, I don't know if the physicists say that there might be these 4 or 5 to 11 dimensions. So if that's happening, then maybe what we're experiencing right now is just a shadow coming down from multiple other um, dimensions. So I mean, there's this great video where Carl Sagan, of all people, he's explaining the fourth dimension, and he pulls out a hypercube,
Mhm.
and he's like, I can't show you what this is, but this is the shadow it would produce, right? So it produces a 3D shadow to us.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that being said, there's a lot that we don't know. So if there's a lot I don't know. I mean, I know my best 1% of what there's available to know. So even in my Christianity, I mean, you know, my I have pretty crazy stories. Like I reserve a lot of judgment about a lot of things because I'm like, I don't freaking. You want to ask me where God came from? You want to ask me the true ontological nature of morality? I'm not going to be able to answer that question. You know, because that's a puzzle. I mean, either could be true. Either side could be true, and either could be wrong, and or maybe they're both wrong. We really wouldn't know. We really wouldn't know how to figure that one out. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
do have a lot of skepticism, but I don't think that atheism, at least the way I understand it, is a viable worldview.
Okay. Um, what would be the distinction between the world that we live in with just 4 dimensions, three spatial one time, and a world with 70 dimensions? Like realistically on us, what's the distinction? How do
Well,
you tell the difference between the two worlds?
okay, well, so one of the biggest, most amazing implications of that would be, Darrington, is that there would have to be a multiverse, okay? Because if you're taking the 3D world into right angles, and you would have to stack up an infinite amount series of, just in the same way as if you want to build another dimension with like flat surfaces, you have to stack an infinite number of them up. So that would be a huge implication, right? So the implication would be that there's a multiverse out there, which I'm actually perfectly fine to accept that premise. Okay, there's that one. The other part of that would be that, I guess you'd say, if you combine that with the fact that the universe is actually infinite, because of the fact that nothing can actually exist. Okay, nothing as we understand it, meaning not something not filled with space or matter, is not possible to exist. Okay, it's never been observed. It cannot exist. So you combine those two things, and then you would understand something, that everything that could happen is going to happen. Okay, so for me, when I think of empathy, this seems to be like the best possible case scenario. Like, because like it just doesn't make sense for me to judge you or someone in Africa or someone in North Korea based off of their one experience that they're going to have now. Like, that just does not make sense to me. Okay, even an atheist, a Satanist, a Muslim, a Hindu, whatever.
Okay.
So if we're able to experience, and I'm not saying being those people, but at least having to be able to observe the totality of things around us. I mean, I think that does have some really big implications, Darrington. Just the way that we see ourselves and people. Because I mean, I could very well have been those guys in
Well,
Columbine,
right. Well,
in
I
my,
mean, I think you're right. There would be big implications, right? For any of these maybes, right? But as a agent, operating inside of this universe, how do I distinguish between universe A and universe B? Like, how do I tell which
no, you're stuck.
model I'm living in? You
You're
can't.
stuck.
Yeah. And so the best we can do is kind of a maybe. And in my mind, if you can't distinguish it, it's the same, right? Like, you can just sort of put everything that's a maybe in this big superposition and say,
Mhm.
we don't know.
Yeah.
It could be any of those, but frankly, since we can't distinguish between them, it's irrelevant.
I think we got to do the best here in this present moment. But the more that we're able to get outside of our own shoes, like, the better we are going to do in this world. Because, in fact, this is going to lead me right into my next series of questions. So I just want to ask you them right now, and then we can maybe circle back to that. But I'm going to ask you 2 questions right now. And each of these questions, I want you to take 1 minute to think about, and I want you to take 1 minute to answer, okay? So suppose we did build a time machine, and we took it back to 1930s Germany, and you had a translator with you, and you were able to talk to Adolf Hitler for 1 minute, only 1 minute. What would be the argument you would use to try to persuade him to not go on the endeavors that he's about to do? Okay? Got it? Got the premise?
Yes.
Okay. So I want you to take 1 minute. Don't answer now.
Okay.
And
I'm gonna repeat the premise. So I've gone back in time. I'm sitting across the table from Adolf Hitler um, maybe like in the 1920s or something, right?
30s. I said 30s.
Okay, 1930s.
Yeah.
So he's sort of coming about his power. He's not like a teenager, right?
Right.
And I'm going to try and convince Herr Hitler to not do the things that I know he's
Yeah.
going to do.
And
Okay.
in the interest of full disclosure, he's probably not going to listen to you anyway, but I'm just wouldn't want to know the argument that you would try to make to him, okay?
I'm a time traveler from the future. This is it. You ready for it?
No.
No?
But you can't say that you're from the future. You know the future. You just, what argument are you making? Like, you're just a normal person, okay?
I can't.
Okay.
Okay. So listen, man. I know you got a lot of ideas going on. And I just want you to know that there's help out there. We can get you some help. I know a fantastic therapist. Let's reason this through. Like, if you're going along this path, a lot of people are going to get hurt, especially you. Let's see if we can get you some help. Why don't we go right now with these nice people who they're going to give you a coat that has long sleeves. It's great. We're just going to go for a ride. And we're going to get better. This is all about healing. Let's just get better so we don't make really big mistake.
Okay, that's it.
That's probably the best I could do.
Okay. So here's the next scenario. Same exact scenario, but this time we're going back to 1950, and you are able to talk to Kim Il-sung, who is the grandson of missionaries, but is himself an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
And he has gotten it into his mind that he is somehow higher on the evolutionary scale, that he is more handsome or charming, or however you want to put it. He's just better than your average Korean person, okay? So in his mind, he's fully in his full rights to use the Korean people as you would use a pig or cow or sheep. And what is going to be your argument you are going to use against him? Again, you have a translator, so yeah. So
Okay.
got the premise of this one?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. 1 minute. Think about it.
Yeah, I know. I got it.
No, I want you to think about this, because that was not a good answer, the one that you said.
No, my Hitler answer was not a good answer.
I'm gonna get to why it's not.
I'm curious about why that's not.
I will tell you right now.
I feel like I should get feedback before I move forward.
No, I'm gonna give it to you afterwards.
Okay. Are you ready? Because my response is not going to change at this point.
Okay, go hit it.
Okay, listen. Just because there is no God does not make you God. That's it. That there is no God doesn't mean you're a God. Problem should be avoided if you can rationalize through that, and I think most of us can.
That's it. Okay, so listen. I'm gonna tell you why that's lacking.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, if you ask me that as a Christian, I would immediately quote the book of James, where it talks about that we should not even say something bad about someone because that person has been created in God's image. So it gives the ultimate foundation for human rights right there from the scripture. So I would definitely appeal to God, and definitely appeal that humans have some kind of objective value, and that you're going to be judged. There's going to be consequences for whatever you think you're getting away with right now. So I've asked that question now to about 5 atheists.
Mm-hmm.
And one person, Oz, you remember Oz, we interviewed him, probably got the closest to giving a good answer. That some of them were just horrible, but none of them, that this is the most troubling thing. This is what I think is the biggest foundational flaw inside of atheism, and which caused me the This is why I said this caused the biggest crack in the ceiling, was that no one was able to say these people have value and you're abusing people with value. No one said that. Okay.
Right.
So this is what I find. So this is why I understand now if atheists in the last.
Let me push back on that for just a
Hold
moment.
on, let me finish this thought. And then, this is why I see for the last 70 years, 100 million people have died at the hands of people who just clearly did not think that people had objective value. And so if in North Korea, for example, during the famines, they said, well, hey, if we don't feed the people, well, only the strongest are going to survive, because literally they're going to start eating other people. So this survival of the fittest Darwinism kicked in a very real way there. So this is why I find atheism to be very dangerous, among other reasons. But go ahead, get in here.
Okay. Psychopaths and sociopaths do exist in the world. Do you agree? Right. We're not.
Yeah,
we're talking about Hitler and Kim Jong-un, and like these are not people that you're going to rationalize the value of human life with. So when you say, what do you do to talk to this person? Well, like the only thing you really can do outside of, take violent action is to try and appeal to their self-care. Because there's clearly something has gone wrong in the mechanics here, and they either need treatment, right, or they need correction. So that kind of goes back to my whole idea of like the social contract thing. Like it's not going to appealing to somebody's value of human, values of human worth is not going to work on a person like Hitler, regardless of what the Bible says or the Quran says, or any other, what the Buddha says. Like none of that is going to work. So I feel like when you say, well, here's this scenario, go, and then we go in a secular manner that does not make reference to, authoritative values or, some objective over encompassing sort of morality system, then you say, oh, you're just wrong. Like that's unfair. I think that if we look towards things like scripture to determine our values, I can find scripture that says completely the opposite of what you're saying. Like, yes, we're built in God's image, but not everyone, just the chosen, right? Just the ones that we don't want to bash against the rocks. So you like, and I'm not using that as an attack point. I'm just saying like, it's in that maybe area. Well, maybe, but that's irrelevant, right? Because you can't put any faith in maybe. Somebody will come along and give a different maybe that completely contradicts yours.
Okay, so Darrington. Okay, so do you realize that you just referred to Adolf Hitler as a sociopath? Do you realize?
Yeah, well, I said psychopaths and sociopaths exist. Yes.
Okay, so by definition, that guy could not be a sociopath because he clearly knew what he was doing wrong. He went out of his way, in fact, to protect a Jewish doctor, for example, who helped him.
I'm not his therapist. I'm not making I'm not his therapist. I could tell you this, but just saying, hey, people have equal value, right, is not would not have stopped Hitler.
Okay, that's fine. That's
right.
Fine. But
I think we can all agree on that. Nobody's disputing that he couldn't have just been talked out of it over, a luncheon one day, right? Like missionaries couldn't have. I don't believe that at all. There was a huge number of socioeconomic, political, like historical factors that came involved with the rise of Hitler. And had the human being Hitler not exist, another human being would have filled that role.
Sure. So by the way, those questions are a bit slanted towards me. So I will say there's a bit of disingenuousness to ask a question like that, but it's generally to see actual people's line of reasoning through something like that. Because the reason why I said you can't mention that, you couldn't mention being a time traveler is because now the descendants of Kim Il-sung is now in office right now. So you might have that conversation with him right now, you know, and he's continuing with the same line of thinking. And I find it to be, honestly, we may disagree with this, and that's fine. I find it to be perfectly 100% logical inside of atheism. In fact, I find slavery to be logical inside of atheism. I find Nazism actually
I don't know how you
totally
get there, to
consistent.
be honest with you.
Well, okay, slavery, because I told you, so if humans are merely animals and we're merely products of evolution, then what is the difference between me using sharing a sheep and me sharing a person, okay, of whatever it is I want to take from you? Because that's what's happening in North Korea. Let me give you an example of what happens in North Korea. People are sent off to other countries to work Darrington, and their entire families are held as leverage, okay? And what happens is these people have to send all of their paychecks back to North Korea, and they are being sheared like sheep. And I cannot find how inside of atheism, if survival of the fittest were not true, if it was true, I do not see what grounds you could, what stance you could take to condemn an action like that. I don't see it. You might be able to wiggle one out, but it's going to be subjective because it's going to be your opinion.
Well, that's true about all of this, right? Like I'm not an expert. I don't have a PhD in the subject, so this is always all going to be my opinion.
Right.
But let me say something here, because you said, well, we're just merely the product of evolution, and I think that does what we are a huge disservice, right? Being the product of natural processes that developed from an early universe to complex chemistry to life to intelligent life is not, there's no merely in there. That's an amazing achievement that was hard fought, for a long time. We are the descendants of the survivors, the ones who, did progress, and we stand here on their shoulders, right, with all of these advantages, like the ability to produce logic and philosophy, and have conversations like this.
Yeah.
So when somebody says, oh well, atheists just believe that we're merely the product of evolution, we're just chemicals, really, like that doesn't do it a service, right? It's more impressive that we came about in this naturalistic process than it would be if just some creator came along and blinked us into existence, right? That's our value goes up like astronomically because of that worldview. The value of human life, I think, is what you're trying to get at, is like, so you think atheists don't, it follows from atheism that human life doesn't have value or human happiness doesn't have value. But it's exactly the opposite. To me, human experience and human life has just an immense amount of value added to it because it is the product of naturalistic processes.
That's okay. So because I'm not trying to disprove you, I can totally accept that as an answer and totally say that is a very well thought out answer. That's one of those answers that's going to stop me in my tracks and be like, okay, I got to go back to the drawing board and rethink about this one a little bit. But okay, let me ask you another question. All right. So what would be worse, to destroy a sandcastle or someone's actual house, or the wave of the sand structure that is it's turned into like the shape of a house or something on the beach? Okay, I want you to rank which one of those three, from the worst to the least, which destruction of those would you find to be worse?
destruction of a house, a sandcastle, or a house made out of sand?
Well, just like a picture, like just sometimes you might just see like a tree or something like, oh God, that looks like Abraham Lincoln or whatever. Like, actually, I
Okay.
just saw one. We just went into a cave in this camp that we're doing, and there's this formation of these stalagmites or whatever those things are called. What are they called?
Stalagmites and stalactites.
Okay. I don't know which one of those were, but it looked like two people were kissing in there. So it's called like the love tunnel or something. But if you were to see some natural occurrence of something that looked like a house, or opposed to something that was deliberately made in the form of a sandcastle or an actual house, the destruction, which one of those would you consider worse?
I mean, there's a lot of nuance to that, right? Does somebody live in the actual house, or is the destruction going to put kids out on the street? Because if it's just a house, it's just a house, right? But we tie meaning to houses because it's important to people.
Well,
Whereas a
no one's going to be able
sandcastle
to
is sort
live
of
in this.
temporary anyway.
No one's going to be able to live in the sandcastle. So that's pretty much all you need to know about that.
I mean, we're presuming it could be a really fancy sandcastle, but
Yes, it
sandcastles
is.
are generally they're generally temporal, right? The waves are
Of
going to
course,
come in and they're going to take them
That's
away.
the point. That's the point.
Yeah,
That's the point.
yeah, and the houses are generally used as some utilitarian purpose, right?
Hmm.
So to make people's lives a little better.
Hmm.
And then the let's call it are we calling it interesting thing that occurs naturally that doesn't
Hmm.
have any utilitarian purpose. I would probably rate it sandcastle, interesting thing, and then house. But that's kind of taking a utilitarian perspective. And I
The
don't know, maybe
sandcastle.
I
Well,
might
the
be really
sandcastle.
attached to the sandcastle.
So wait. You're saying that the sandcastle it would be the most valuable
No,
thing out of this?
no, you said like order in like the most valuable is the house, and followed
Okay.
by the monument, and then followed by the sandcastle. And I don't
Okay.
know what to call that middle thing, but I'm gonna call it a monument.
Yeah. Okay. Well, whatever. Just some natural. Well, you know what it is. You just see like a face or whatever somewhere.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just like
So okay.
a interesting thing.
So okay. So I just want to draw the reason I'm asking that question is because when someone's doing something intentionally and with purpose, that and there's some kind of, I guess, deeper utility or value behind it, that we would place more value on something like that. And even something like a sandcastle, as you say, the sandcastle is going to come up, it's going to look beautiful, and it's going to get washed away.
Mhm.
And then you have just something that's more naturally occurring. I guess you rate that higher. I mean, I guess I would rate the sand. I would switch up those two. Objectively speaking, we'd have to put the house first because whether or not someone lives there or not isn't really relevant because someone could potentially, like, it could be a rental house, whatever. That's not really relevant. It's the fact that it could take someone from off the streets and someone could be sleeping in that house tonight. So that's
Right.
just
So when you say objectively more valuable, though, from a utilitarian perspective, right? Because maybe I want to take a aesthetic perspective to it, right? And to me, the sandcastle is just much more beautiful. In which case that would have more value. So like you can approach value from different perspectives and get different answers.
uh yeah. I mean, I guess you can say that, but I the reason why I gave that an analogy, and I just thought of that right now because
Mhm.
I'm not going to say I'm right or you're wrong over this because it's not like I think you're an axe murderer. I hope to God you're not an axe murderer. I don't want to getting associated with you later on. Like, hey, Isaiah was doing this podcast with this axe murderer. So I don't think you're someone like that. I don't
Right.
think you're a sociopath. But 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 getting back to whether or not there is, or you call Hitler a sociopath, which I don't believe that he was a sociopath, but you say you take someone like, I've talked to you, um, I talked to you about Jeffrey Dahmer, and you said, well, that guy's just like a that guy's just a psychopath. Well, okay, maybe that is the case, but I showed you that there was a 7-year gap between him killing the first person and him killing the seventh person, or the second person, in between killing the 17 people that he wound up killing totally, because he believed that these people had some kind of objective value inside of Christianity. Now, say the guy was crazy, whatever. Well,
Right.
maybe religion serves that utility value of preventing people like him. Like maybe if these guys from Columbine actually did believe in God and said, well, you know what? I may not like these people, but it's probably better off that I not go around killing people before I kill myself, because there's something much worse in this life after. I think it has some utility there, that there's a subjective utility that you find, and I can say it's like atheism would be like a box over there and be like, yeah, there's potentially $1 million in that box, but then I guess we'd have to parse this somehow and say, yeah, but then there's also a bomb that's going to go off like 33% of the time. So you're going to take that risk to
Yeah.
go open that box?
So
I don't think so.
I don't point out that there, mental illness exists. These mental illnesses exist because I'm just, throwing away that piece of evidence as an outlier. I'm pointing it out because if you look at their time for all of these individuals, if you look at their timeline, at some point had intervention and therapy been applied, right, then the bad situation wouldn't have happened, because the problem would have been treated as a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we don't often consider that, in game theory, we might consider it like a bad actor, right? It's just a bad actor. It's just somebody who's misbehaving. But that's we are all the product of the circumstances that
Yeah.
we were born into. We have no control
Yeah.
over. So I don't think I do think that there are a lot of Christians out there, religious people in general, doesn't necessarily have to be Christians, who don't go out and do terrible things because they're worried about the punishment of hell. But I would say that applying actual rational therapy, like we know how to do now, to these people could also prevent them from doing those bad things. So religion is not the only answer, and religion
Yeah.
comes with a bunch of extra stuff. Why not use the one that's more simpler and that we can confirm works?
You know what? Okay. So actually, I can tell you from my own personal experience. I can guarantee this: the indoctrination that I got growing up was actually traumatic. But I can guarantee this: had I not gotten that, I would have 100% killed myself, because that was literally the only thing that was stopping me from from committing suicide. Is this concept that my mom would, and I'm not even sure, I don't even think it's biblical, honestly, that if you commit suicide, you're automatically going to. I don't see that anywhere in the Bible, but it's probably useful for people who might naturally have those kind of inclinations. But I do agree with that matter of seeking help, because I did seek help after becoming a Christian, and it helped me to reunite with my wife. So I'm grateful for that. I want to ask you one last question. And you ready?
Yeah.
This one's going to take a little bit of time to process, so I'm going to give you another minute. But I want you, do you have a piece of paper handy?
I could just bring up Notepad.
Okay, so
I
I
don't do
want you to,
paper very well.
I want you to, on a scale of 1 through 100, I want you to parse where exactly your atheism stems from. Does it stem from just a lack of evidence, 20%, 30% the things that went wrong in your life, whatever abuse you suffered, 20% dealing with people like this Anderson guy, Sam Anderson. Sam Anderson, what is his name?
Oh, I don't remember his first name.
Steve Anderson.
I try to forget he exists occasionally.
Right. So I want you to So it needs to equal 100. And I want you to parse this out. This is why I'm giving a little bit of time to think about this from 1 to 100. Okay.
Just atheism. We're not talking about my anti-theism, which is a different subject. Right?
Atheism.
Just the
But just in
non-belief in
general,
God.
just take it, just everything.
Okay. Because well, the scope changes, right?
Okay.
If
Well,
we're just talking about my disbelief in God, it's 100% evidence-based. Give me evidence for God. I want to believe, but nobody can. So like, scale that out to anti-theism, which is a completely different subject. The anti-theism is probably mostly, I would say, mostly 90% for this guy like Anderson, who religion is used as a weapon against people who have different beliefs.
I want you to write, just factor everything and try to make a list of 100. Okay. I want you to take 1 minute to process that one, right?
Okay. Percentage wise, what drives my atheism? Is that correct? I would say it's 100% evidence based. If there was real evidence for a higher power, then I would be on board.
I like this guy.
And if you were okay, so what if it was a Christian God and you just found the stories and everything to be like impalpable? Would you still go along with it if it contradicted your own moral compass?
Well, okay, once we determine whether or not it's real, now we have to, question what we're going to do with it. So, depending on how that divinity operates, I may or may not be on board, depending on my own, observations of it. So, I don't see the way, let me put it this way. The way that the Christian God has been presented to me throughout my life, I don't see that as being a benevolent deity. And so I may rebel out of principle.
Hell yeah, rebel.
All right. Well, that being said, Darrington, I want to thank you for the answers to those questions. And as I always say, we're never going to solve the problem of God in a single podcast, but we're moving the yardstick along. And that's a football reference, by the way, in case you didn't get that, Darrington. And I know you don't watch football.
It's first down.
Touchdown.
Yeah.
So that being said, we want to thank you for joining us today at RIG Podcast, and be sure to check out our website at www.rigpodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe. Send us an email for the topic you'd like to see us discuss. And if you like this, leave us a comment below about what you thought. And thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.
Hey, it's Locust Luciano.
La la la.